have to remember that there are a million things that have to go right for an egg to be created and be genetically correct, and a sperm to be created and be genetically correct, and for them to find their way together, and all those chromosomes match up and find their partner, okay, and for that to then progress to a viable infant. So many things have to go right, okay? And anywhere in that progression, there can be problems.
As I was about to enter into my second trimester, I had a routine scan, and my OB came into the office and he said, I'm a little OCD, but I see something on the bladder of the scan, and I just want you to get checked. And I didn't think much of it. I just moved forward with enthusiasm and anticipation and made the appointment. And I actually went to the appointment by myself, didn't think to bring my husband or daughter. It just felt like too much. And I remember seeing that scan the first time, and I saw the bladder this time, and it was different. It was almost the size of the head of the baby. And I just waited for the doctor to come in after the scan, and this was the first of many doctors after that. And she told me that the baby had something called ludo, which was lower urinary tract obstruction, which meant that the bladder wasn't draining, and that it meant that many things at that point, which I couldn't even wrap my head around because I was so stunned, but that it meant that I could potentially go to Houston and they could potentially put some sort of shunt in my stomach to drain it, but it could potentially end in miscarriage, and it still could potentially mean the baby wouldn't survive.
Because everyone's expectation is for a happy pregnancy and delivery, we try to be upbeat during prenatal care while guarding against the dangers of prenatal care, pregnancy and delivery. That's a tough knife edge to walk, to try to warn people about possibilities and of danger, and yet be positive about outcomes, hope for outcomes. What's happened since 2022 is all conversations are fraught with the peril of what if I'm misunderstood? And I feel this coming from patients towards me. They wonder, can they trust me? And I wonder what their positions are on pregnancies when things are going wrong.
All abortions are illegal unless using reasonable medical judgment it endangers the life of the mother. The big question for us now is, well, who defines reasonable medical judgment, right? So we used to think, well, physicians decided what reasonable medical judgment is. And what we've seen in several cases, particularly the Kate Cox case, is that even if a physician thought it was reasonable medical judgment, the court then upheld it. Then the Supreme Court of the state of Texas came back and said, no, that doesn't qualify. So who decides this? The courts or the physicians?
I have a patient who has an abnormality that is so rare that if we had made a list, as some people have suggested, we would have forgotten this abnormality. And if we had put this abnormality on the list, then we still might have had debate over it, because sometimes this particular abnormality can cause something like an amputation of an arm. But in this particular patient's case, this abnormality causes for no skull formation. The brain is on the outside of the body. The heart is on the outside of the body. The lungs are on the outside of the body. There's no rib cage. The stomach is on the outside of the body. I sincerely thought this person should be able to terminate this pregnancy in Texas. Of course, I was wrong because of the Cox case, had already decided on this.
We still felt hopeful, and I still, wanted this so badly. And we began seeing specialists. And there were many scans. And with each scan, we saw the bladder getting bigger and bigger. And with each appointment with fetal specialists, we were told a series of very scary options. Many of them we still felt were hopeful. But at our final appointment at Dell Fetal Center, they did a scan and they saw that not only was his bladder not draining, it was a boy, we found out. And we found out that he had a layer of fluid between his skin and his skeleton. And it meant that he was having heart failure and also what they call adrenal failure. And so this sort of this window where we thought, well, maybe they can put a shunt in and drain his bladder, began feeling increasingly unlikely. And as the doctor sort of explained what that procedure would be like, he said that that it doesn't work as much as they had hoped originally, and that his future would be daily catheters that I'd have to put in, which would be exceptionally painful. He would have to be on dialysis until he could receive one of our kidneys. And we looked into all of that until they told us that he was dying and that he was experiencing heart failure and adrenal failure. And that it was just a matter of time until he was going to die. And we didn't know when, but he was going to die inside of me.
It is difficult for women in the Texas House to debate abortion issues because we often have to speak of our own personal stories, and that is not comfortable. It is unfortunate that we have to do it, but it is the reality, really, for Texas women that their own personal stories are now being decided by our government. Early on in our marriage, I got pregnant with a very much desired pregnancy. I was pregnant with a baby girl, and early in the pregnancy, well, actually, it was at the end of the first trimester, I learned that she had a fetal abnormality and a condition called trisomy 18 that is not compatible with life. So I had a week to make a decision about whether to terminate the pregnancy or go forward with the pregnancy. I am Catholic. As I was trying to make what felt like an impossible decision because I already loved this life growing in me, but understand that the doctor advised when I asked, is she suffering? He said, every cell in her body is sick. So yes, she is suffering and she will probably start suffering more. In the end, I made a decision to not terminate the pregnancy. And ultimately, the baby I was carrying stayed alive till the end of the pregnancy, and I ended up delivering her, and she was stillborn. She did not live. When I tell you that my faith community was there with me every step of the way, they waited in the waiting room during my delivery, prepared to give sacraments because they knew that this baby would not live.
It felt like the most loving and merciful thing that we could do for our son was to end the pregnancy. And as they told us that, they also said that we had no options in Texas and that they weren't even allowed to write our options down on a piece of paper.
If I were diagnosed today with the same diagnosis I had 20 years ago, I would have no option but to carry a fetus to term that would not live. to full term, 9 months, by government mandate, or leave the state to see if I could find care in another state to terminate the pregnancy. But other than that, I'd have no option to terminate a pregnancy for a fetus that would not live. It was hard enough for me to make that choice based in faith. I cannot imagine the anger to know that I'd have to make that choice based on the law, that the government would be basically shackling me to a forced birth of a baby that would not live. I can't even imagine what that would feel like.